In May 2024, Bayern Munich did something that made football laugh. One of the biggest clubs on earth had just finished third in the Bundesliga. Their aura was damaged. Their manager was gone. Their dominance was broken. And their answer was Vincent Kompany. Not Xabi Alonso, not Julian Nagelsmann, not some Champions League proven genius. Vincent Kompany, a manager who had just been relegated from the Premier League with Burnley. To the outside world, it looked desperate. It looked emotional. It looked like Bayern had run out of ideas. But Pep Guardiola saw something else. Because when Bayern asked Pep about Kompany, the message was simple. Take him. Not carefully, not maybe, not if the conditions are right. Take him. And that is where this story becomes bigger than one appointment. Because Guardiola was not judging Kompany by the league table, he was judging him by something football often ignores until it is too late. Process. The world saw a relegated manager. Guardiola saw a future elite coach. And maybe the real question was never why Bayern trusted Kompany. Maybe the real question was this: how did Guardiola know years before everyone else? The warning did not begin in Munich. It began in Manchester. When Guardiola arrived at Manchester City in 2016, Vincent Kompany was already a legend at the club. He had lifted Premier League titles. He had captained City through their rise. He had scored one of the most important goals in the club's modern history against Manchester United in 2012. But by the time Pep arrived, Kompany's body was no longer reliable. Injuries kept interrupting him. Matches came and went without him. City were evolving into Guardiola's machine, and Kompany was no longer guaranteed to be the center of it. But Guardiola noticed something most people missed. Kompany was still leading. Even when he was not playing, he was organizing, he was talking, he was studying. He was seeing the game like a coach before he officially became one. That matters, because Guardiola does not only judge footballers by what they do with the ball, he watches what they understand without it. And with Kompany, he saw a defender who was already thinking in systems, lines, distances, triggers, space, timing, responsibility. This was not just a captain shouting in a dressing room. This was a manager forming inside a player's body. Years later, in March 2023, Guardiola said it openly. He said Kompany's destiny to manage Manchester City was written in the stars. Most people treated it like respect for an old captain, but it was more than loyalty. It was a diagnosis. Pep had seen the coaching DNA long before the world saw the job title. To understand why Guardiola believed, you have to understand what Kompany represented. He was not just a defender. He was City's emotional architecture. When Manchester City won the Premier League in 2011-12, it was Sergio Aguero's goal that became immortal. But before that final day chaos against QPR, there was Kompany's header against Manchester United on April 30th, 2012. A 1-0 win. A captain rising above everyone. A goal that shifted the title race. That was Kompany as a player. Physical, fearless, intelligent, impossible to ignore. But the deeper version of him was always mental. He understood leadership not as noise, but as control. He could command a backline. He could communicate across cultures. He could speak to stars without sounding impressed by them. And under Guardiola, he absorbed another football language: possession, pressing, positional play. The idea that defending begins before the tackle. The idea that structure is not decoration. It is protection. Then came May 6th, 2019. Manchester City were fighting Liverpool in one of the greatest Premier League title races ever. Against Leicester City, with the score still 0-0, Kompany took the ball from distance. Nobody wanted him to shoot, not the fans, not his teammates, probably not Pep. But he struck it. A thunderbolt. City won 1-0. They finished the season 1 point ahead of Liverpool. And then almost immediately, Kompany left. That was the strange beauty of it. His final great act as a City player was not a tackle. It was a decision. A captain reading the moment before everyone else could. Then he became a manager, and football did what football always does. It judged too quickly. At Anderlecht, the story was messy. Kompany returned to the club that raised him, first as a player-manager, then as full-time manager. But Anderlecht were not the Anderlecht of old. The club had financial problems, internal pressure, and expectations that did not match reality. People thought the problem was Kompany, But the real problem was the gap between his vision and the club's condition. He wanted to build. Anderlecht needed instant repair. He wanted structure. The club lived in instability. He wanted to teach a modern game. The environment demanded old answers. Then came Burnley. And this is where the world began to see a flash of what Pep had already seen. Burnley had been known for a very different kind of football under Sean Dyche. Direct, physical, compact, brutal to play against. Kompany arrived in 2022 and changed everything. Not slowly, immediately. Burnley started building from the back. They dominated the ball. They played with courage. They won the championship in 2022 to 23 with 101 points. Suddenly, Kompany was not naive. He was brilliant. Then the Premier League returned, and the praise disappeared. Burnley finished 19th in 2023 to 24 and went down with 24 points. The same people who had called him the future now called him stubborn. People thought the problem was his football. But the real problem was scale, a young squad, limited resources, a brutal league, a style still being built against opponents already operating at top speed. The table said failure, but Guardiola was not reading only the table. He was reading the work underneath it. That is why Bayern Munich changed everything. Because when Bayern appointed Kompany on May 29, 2024, the football world did not see vision. It saw panic. A relegated manager walking into a club built on trophies. A coach with Burnley scars entering a dressing room with Harry Kane, Joshua Kimmich, Jamal Musiala, Leroy Sané, and Champions League expectations. The pressure could have swallowed him, but instead, Bayern began to look like Bayern again. In September 2024, they beat Dinamo Zagreb 9-2 in the Champions League. It was violent, fast, overwhelming football. Harry Kane scored 4. Bayern looked hungry again. And in the Bundesliga, Kompany restored control. The same coach mocked for relegation guided Bayern back to the title in his first season. That is the truth football had missed. Kompany's career was never a straight line. It was an education. Anderlecht taught him that ideas need infrastructure. Burnley taught him that a system can dominate one level and still suffer at another. Bayern gave him the platform to prove that the idea was never the problem. The problem was timing. The world thought Kompany had failed because Burnley went down. Guardiola understood that sometimes relegation does not expose a lack of intelligence. Sometimes it exposes the limits of the tools around the intelligence. That is why Pep's belief mattered. He was not predicting magic. He was recognizing pattern. The captain who organized without playing, the player who studied the game while living inside it, the manager who kept teaching even when results turned against him. The leader who walked into crisis and tried to impose clarity. Football saw a risk. Guardiola saw continuity. And now, the story feels different. Vincent Kompany is no longer just the Manchester City captain with the statue outside the Etihad. He is not just the Burnley manager who went up with 101 points and came back down with pain. He is not just the surprise Bayern appointment people mocked before they understood. He is something rarer. A reminder that football does not always reveal truth in the right order. Sometimes the evidence comes before the results. Sometimes the lesson looks like failure before it looks like destiny. And sometimes the smartest person in the room is not the one reacting to the latest table. It is the one watching how a football mind survives pressure. Guardiola warned us years ago, not with a prophecy, with recognition. He saw Kompany the coach before the world stopped seeing Kompany the player. And maybe that is the difference between opinion and vision. Opinion watches what happened yesterday. Vision understands what is being built for tomorrow. So, when Kompany stood at Bayern with the weight of a giant club on his shoulders, maybe he was not proving Pep right. Maybe football was finally catching up. And if you want to understand another manager whose warning was ignored until it became impossible to deny, watch the story of Mourinho and Tottenham next.